September 13th, 1933, which happened to be on Chof Beis Elul, Tov Reish Tzadi Gimel. 2 days before the Ptira of HaKoyen HaGodol Me'echov, the Chofetz Chaim, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha. Right now, Chof Daled Elul, we are celebrating his 87th Yortzeit today. In Eretz Yisrael, it's already at night, but here, where I am at, Chof Daled Elul is the Yortzeit of the Chofetz Chaim. So I want to share with you a little story before we get. A story which Rav Mendel Zaks, his son-in-law, told us. He was there by the week of the Ptira of the Chofetz Chaim. And on February 13th, Chof Beis Elul, 2 days prior to the Ptira of the Chofetz Chaim, the family gathered because the doctor in Radin told them that the matzav is a shver matzav. And they asked the Chofetz Chaim, Tate, was it sein? Daddy, what's going to be? Chofetz Chaim was at a time, there's a machlekes to his age, as at least 95, and in other biographies 97, 100, all the way to 105. But he was merely, if I take a blended average, it was approximately 100 years of age. Chofetz Chaim opened up the Chumash. It was exactly the parsha we read yesterday, Parshas Nitzavim Vayelech. He asked him to turn the pages to Perek Lamed Aleph Pasuk Vav, and he pointed, he couldn't talk. It was very, very hard for him to say a few sentences. But he did point to the Pasuk. Ve'Hashem hu ha'hoilech lefanecha, hu yiyeh imoch, lo yarpecha ve'lo ya'azveka, lo yisira ve'lo yiteichas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He is walking in front of you. He shall be with you. Lo yarpecha ve'lo ya'azveka. He shall not leave you. Lo yisira ve'lo yisichad. There's no reason to be scared. There's no reason to be afraid. This is what the Chofetz Chaim said. And I would like to talk about what did the Chofetz Chaim mean today on the Yortzeit of the Chofetz Chaim. We are in the days before Rosh Hashanah. This is a special shiur dedicated to a good friend, Matisio Yered ben Miriam. You should have refuah shleima b'meheira min hashamayim. A dear friend for many years, and I would like to walk with you through this lo yarpecha ve'lo ya'azveka. What is really, what is the Chofetz Chaim telling us? What does he want from us? And I would like to share with you 2 Rashis. Rashi in our week's parsha, lo yarpecha ve'lo ya'azveka. Rashi says, the Kodesh Baruch Hu loy nosati loy rifyain, liois ne'ezov mimenu. I'm not going to let you be shvach. Rifyain, dovar rofe, means somebody who is shvach, who is weak. I'm not going to let you be weak, liois ne'ezov mimenu. But in essence, if you look in the terminology of Rashi throughout Tanakh, you will find a different definition to the word lo yarpech. If you look in the beginning in Sefer Devarim, it says, Ki eil rachum Hashem Elokecha lo yarpecha ve'lo yashchisecha. Says Rashi, milehachzik becha beyodov. Veloshen lo yarpecha ulo yiten lecha rifyoin lo yafrish oischa me'etzloi. When a mother holds on to a baby, walking in the street, the baby has to be connected. The baby has to be holding. The pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, Kimat she'avarti at shemotzosi, es she'ahavo nafshi, achaztiv v'lo yarpenu. Rashi brings this pasuk. Rifyain is not merely a lashon of weakness. Rifyain means they are tied together. It's not disconnected. I'm there for you at all times. Loi nosati loi rifyoin, I'm holding a achaztiv v'loi arpenu. Not going to let him go. Not going to let him go. We remain and we stay connected. I want to go a little bit into it for the days of Rosh Hashanah and come out with some crystal ball. What does it mean? Don't let it be. Lo yitna lecha rifyoin liyos ne'ezov mimenu. Rashi really means it's not a shvachkeit, it's not a weakness, but rather it's staying connected. I want to tell you a story. There's another yortzeit that happened this week. A yortzeit of Rebel Lapian. It happened last Wednesday in Chof Elul, the 50th yortzeit of Rebel Lapian. I don't know if all of you heard of Rebellia. Rebellia was a kelamer. He was a mashgiach for the last many years of his life in Kfar Hasidim Yeshiva. He was a tzaddik Yesod Olam. He had many, many talmidim. Really, if you listen to the shmuzin of Reb Shalom Shvadron, he says over most of the Torah he received from Rebel Lapian. Rebel Lapian came from Kelm. He moved to London, and thereafter he came to Eretz Yisrael, where he spent the rest of his life. As a child, I participated in his Levaya in Bayit Vagan exactly 50 years ago, this past Wednesday, Chof Elul. Rebel Lapian says a story, and I would like to share with you the story. He came to the United States of America. He had to go, he had some kind of a medical condition, which he came to a doctor in Manhattan. He stayed in Borough Park in Brooklyn, and he went with a car to Manhattan. He did not want to come to America. America was for him a treifene land. It wasn't a kosher land. They put not a masecha, a mask on his mouth, on his nose. He wanted a masecha on his eyes, traveling from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And when he came to the doctor and took off his masecha to speak to the doctor, he told his driver, 20 yor Musar is avek. 20 years of Musar expired in this short journey from Brooklyn to Manhattan. To make a long story short, Rebelli came to one of the klein shtettlach in the Midwest to collect money. He wasn't really collecting. He used to sit in his house. People used to come to him. And they told him, there is a Yid here, not a Frum Yid, not a Shomer Shabbos, doesn't eat kosher, and actually is married to a shiktzah and has 3 goyish children. But he gives money to kol dover shebekdusha. If it's the mikveh, if it's the school, if it's the cheder, if it's the yeshiva, if it's a Talmud Torah, he is the sole sponsor giving for anything you're asking for Yiddishkeit. He is the sponsor. And he heard that Rebellia came to town, and it would be Rebellia said, I'm not going to take any money from him because I don't take money from a person who's not a Shomer Shabbos for yeshiva. But the Olam said he has to see him because he needs to give him to pay this minimal courtesy to be bestowed upon him. He met him. He comes into Rebellia. Rebellia tells him, "Vos macht a Yid?" He was a Yid from Lita. Where are you from? I'm from a little shtetl called Aishashuk. Aishashuk. He says, I was a little child. I really wasn't with the program. I have a good head, but learning wasn't for me. I started flunking through 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And then by the time I turned bar mitzvah, a couple months later, I was caught in the yeshiva, in the cheder, wherever he was, smoking on Shabbos. The menahel said, you're smoking on Shabbos, you don't belong here, out of here. Threw him out. And the Rav of Aishashuk said, we will send you to the Chofetz Chaim to Radin. He had a yeshiva in Radin. And in Radin, perhaps you'll be able to straighten out by the Chofetz Chaim. To make a long story short, he travels in January in the freezing cold Litvische winter. He comes into the yeshiva and he comes to the mashgiach. The mashgiach looks at him 2 minutes to shots him up, and he says, what are you coming here for? So he says, I was an honest boy. I said, I was caught smoking on Shabbos. I really don't daven. They had bar mitzvah a couple months ago. I don't put on film. And I was thrown out. And the rabbi of the city of Aishashuk thought that if I came here, perhaps I could reconstruct my life again. Shgiach told him, a bacher that is not Shomer Shabbos, doesn't have a mokum in our yeshiva. He says, yeah, but I came, I want to try. He says, I'm sorry, I'm afraid from the influence, your negative influence on the other Bachim in the yeshiva. Nothing helped. He walked out in the freezing cold night. He turns back, calls to the Mashgiach, he says, listen, could I stay? One of the boys I know from Aishashuk was an older boy, he has an apartment, a stanza, what they call. Could I go and stay by him? Mashgiach says, no, not even for one night. I'm sorry, over. So this Bacher told him, let's go to the Chofetz Chaim. Chofetz Chaim sitting at home. He says he walks into the Chofetz Chaim's house, it was at night, he was afraid, maybe it was too late. He sees through the window, Chofetz Chaim is learning with a candle by his Gemara, and he makes a little noise. Chofetz Chaim heard the noise, he opened the door, he says, Ye Ingale, was willst du? He says, you know what? This is a story. This is my situation. I came to the Mashgiach. I was thrown out. I was not accepted. And I have nowhere to go. Chofetz Chaim says, the Mashgiach, I'm not mixing into the acceptance in the yeshiva. But what says, Aid, a Jew comes to my house. You my guest. Be my guest. And he starts serving him. He said, did you eat from the morning? He started serving him. Started giving him. He started, he says, he bricht ein Glas tea, and a zweite Glas tea, one cup of tea and another cup of tea. And then he says, I woke up 4 o'clock in the morning to go on the train, and it was a long journey for me. I felt like I'm falling asleep. Chofetz Chaim says, Nishto kein shum problem. He takes his couch. He says he was so freezing cold in the house of the Chofetz Chaim, that when Chofetz Chaim was learning, he saw steam coming out of his mouth. Chofetz Chaim says, Ligdo, he says, is this the Rebbe's bed? He says, just go lay down, chapashlof. He says the Chofetz Chaim put him, and he says he fell asleep. But he really couldn't fall asleep. He was so nervous, and he was so overwhelmed with the situation, looking at the Chofetz Chaim. He heard of the Chofetz Chaim, the God Lador, sitting and learning. And he says every few minutes the Chofetz Chaim goes there, and he makes sure the blanket is covering him well. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Chofetz Chaim was sitting there with his pelts, with his fur coat. It was so freezing cold. Chofetz Chaim looked at him and he said, it seems like I wasn't as comfortable as a guest in a 5-star hotel would be. Chofetz Chaim took off his mantle, took off his coat, went to him while he was ki'ilu sleeping. Chofetz Chaim thought he was sleeping. He took that coat, he covered him, he cuddled him, and he says, the next thing he knew was 9 o'clock in the morning. He says, I left, I went back to Aishashuk. I never turned out to be a Frumid. I rolled, I came to America, I made a lot of money. I don't keep Shabbos, I don't keep Yom Kippur, I don't keep Rosh Hashanah. I have my wife is a shiktzah, I have children shkotzim, I don't keep anything. But when the Yidden fellow friend come and they remind me of the Chofetz Chaim, he says, der mantale, this warm fur coat at night, that the Chofetz Chaim covered me with, the warmth, the Warmkeit, what he said in Yiddish, helped me and holds me on till many years later. When the mikveh needs, push comes to shove, I am the person right there to give. Lo yarpecho v'lo yazveko. Chofetz Chaim didn't say just a veltel. Chofetz Chaim didn't say just a pasuk. Chofetz Chaim was teaching us a lesson. Lo yarpecho. There are times that you merely are getting to be disconnected. You feel that you're losing it. The mother is there, you're holding on to the hand, and it's hard. The grip is hard, and then you get disconnected. Lo yarpecho v'lo yazvech. Take him back, cuddle him, cover him, bestow this warmth, this love upon him. I want to share with you the Gemara in Maseches Shabbos, a fascinating Gemara, and we'll learn it together. The Gemara says there's a pasuk in Sefer Yeshaya. The pasuk say, Ki ato avinu, ki Avram lo yadoanu, veYisrael lo yakirenu, ato Hashem avinu go aleinu. The pasuk is ambiguous. Ki ato avinu, who is ato avinu? Ki Avram lo yadoanu, veYisrael Yaakov avinu lo yakirenu, ato Hashem avinu go aleinu. Listen to this dialogue taking place between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Avos L'Asid Lovoi. Says the Gemara, and I'm quoting, L'Asid Lovoi oimer lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu le'Avram. In a future generation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes and has this dialogue with Avram, Bonecha chot'u li. Your children sinned, li, to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Oymar lefanov, says Avram to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Imachu al kedushas shmecho, go ahead and eradicate them. They ate, they gotta pay. Avram Avinu. Omar, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Eima li Yaakov, the Avil et Tsar Gidul Bonim. Yaakov had Tsar Gidul Bonim, bringing up the 12 Shvatim. Perhaps when I come to him, he will be the good advocate. He would be able to be the Sanegar on the children. Efshe the Bar Rachme Alei, maybe he will be the one to ask for Rachamim from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Omar Lei, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yaakov, Banecha Chotu. Omar Lefanov, Ribono Shel Olam, Imachu al Kedusha Shmecha, let him be eradicated. Exact the same duplication of answer to what his grandfather Avram says Yaakov Avinu. Omar, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Loi besavei tamo v'loi bedardake eitzo. I ain't going to be helped, not for the grandfather and not for the grandchild. They're both not. Omar le Yitzchak bonecha chotuli. Omar lefonov. Ribono shel olam. Bonai v'loi bonecha. You're telling me bonecha? You're talking to me as if it's my children, not your children? B'shoshi ikdimu lefonecha naisa lenishma karasa lehem b'ni b'chari. Achshav bonai v'loi bonecha. When Klal Yisrael was a height of Nasa Lanishma, they were Makdim. You called them B'ni B'chayri, my firstborn child, B'ni B'chayri Yisrael. And now they messed up. B'nai v'lei b'necha. V'oid, here is an arbitrator. Here is a litigation lawyer trying to diffuse this lawsuit. Kama chotu. Let's make a cheshbon. Kama shneisav shalodom. How long does a person live? Shivim shana. 70 years. Yemei chayenu b'hem shivim shana. It's a possible that the Melech says in Tilim. Dal estrim deloi anashlu. The first 20 years, b'dei shamayim, there is no oynish. B'dei odom, you become a gadol by 30. Or b'dei shamayim, the first 20 years, you don't have oynish. Delete the first 20 years. Pashalu chamshin. There's only 50 left. Dal esri v'chamisha deleiloso. Take off the nights. A person doesn't see it at night. Pashul esri v'chamish. There's only 25 years left. Dal tarte v'sore upalga detzloyu umeichal the beis hakise. From this 25, take off 12 and a half because a person has to eat, a person has to go to the bathroom, and a person has to daven. Pashalu tarte sore upalga. All there is 12 and a half years that a person theoretically could sing. If your Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to take all of them upon yourself, mutov. V'im lav, however, if you're not, palga alai v'palga alecha. Let's make a deal, 50-50. I take 6.25 years, and you take 6.25 years. V'im toimar kulo alai. If you say, you know what, I'm not taking part of it, you paid the bill for the entire 12 and a half years, akarivta nafshe kamoch. I was makriv my nefesh, says Rashi, in Akedas Yitzchok, that we're going to celebrate. It's going to come on this Rosh Hashanah, the anniversary of Akedas Yitzchok. I was moist nefesh. So give me this minimal courtesy to be bestowed upon him. Paschu v'amru, Avinu ato. Klal Yisrael started saying, you are our father. Omar leim Yitzchok, achatem mekalsin li, kalsu lakodesh Baruch Hu. Don't give me the praise. Umachvelu Yitzchok Kedusha Brichu Be'enayu. Yitzchok is pointing out to the Shamayim, look up. Miyad nosu eineim lamorim ve'omru ato Hashem avinu goyaleinu me'olam shmecha. It's a fascinating Gemara. This Gemara is so schwer, but I would like to focus on one nekuda. We know the three Ovis. Avram Avinu is Amud HaChesed. Avram Avinu is the master, the pillar of Chesed, of mercy, of charity. Yaakov is Amud HaEmes. Titen Emes leYaakov, Chesed leAvram. Yitzchok is Amud HaDin. Yitzchok is Din. Din, Mishpat is Yitzchok. How is it that Yitzchak is the one that goes in, stick his neck for Klal Yisrael, who sinned, and his father and his son say, Imocha al Kedusha Shemeh? I'd like to share with you a word from the Goyen. I'm a little bit dressing it up, but the Iker word steht in Goyen. Goyen says the lawyer for Klal Yisrael cannot be Avram Avinu. Why? Avram Avinu had a son, Ishmael. He loved him. As bincho, as yechidcho, asher after, he says, I have two sons, I love them both. They're both equal, they're both unique to me. But thereafter, when Ishmael started batching up, Vateres Sores Yitzchok Metzachek Avodah Gilarayas, exit strategy, they sent him with a UPS package one way, no return envelope. Out of here! I don't want him to spoil my son. Yitzchok cannot be contaminated from his brother Ishmael, who is Avodah Gilarayas Shvichas Domim. There is an incident of somebody who's going off the D, as we call today, making a left turn, and Avram Avinu is not accepting, is not welcoming. Yaakov Avinu, I got news for you. Let me tell you some story maybe you don't know about. Yaakov had one daughter. Maybe he had some other daughters who were born with the Shvatim, but we go with Rav Yehuda. He had only one daughter, Dina. Dina has a story, Pashas Veishlach Mishchem. She walks out of Shechem's house pregnant. She didn't want to get out. And her brother Shimon told her, I'm going to marry you. And he married her, and they had together a child, Shaul ben Aknais. But she came out pregnant. For this pregnancy was born a little girl. Her name was Osnat. You know why they called her Osnat? Because as soon as she walked into Yaakov Avinu's house, Shimon and Levi, the hot-headed brothers, come to Yaakov, come to Yaakov Avinu, and they say, are we going to perpetuate this news? Let's get her out of the way. They take this little baby, they take her to the border of Mitzrayim over the wall. Okay? And they put her into the sneh. And the sneh, the reason why the Medrash says she's called Osnat, she's going into the sneh. She's being picked up on the Egyptian side and taken to a foster home, to Beis Yisraelim. And Paro's daughter takes her and adopts her. And then when Potiphar and his wife Zlika were both Akorim, can't have any children, Paro tells his daughter, give this baby to Potiphar and his wife. When she left the house of Yaakov, Yaakov took a metal, he took a piece of Tas Shel Mateches, a square block of metal, and he wrote on it, Bas Yisrael Ksheira, 3 words, and he put it on her neck. To make a long story short, Yosef comes to Mitzrayim, Yosef becomes a Mishnah L'Melech, and it says Paro is giving him a shidduch as Osnas Bas Potiphar. She's not adopted. She's not a real daughter. She's adopted. He's really, really marrying his sister's daughter. His sister's Dina's daughter. And from that Zivu comes out Menashe and Ephraim. She says to him, don't look at me. I'm not Egyptian. Here it is. Here's my passport. Here is my tattoo from Grandpa, from my grandfather Yaakov Avinu. And he marries him. But in essence, when this tragedy happens and Dina goes off and there is a fruit from this of the D scenario, she doesn't find place in Yaakov Avinu's house. She's expelled. So when Bonecho Chotu, Yaakov cannot be the advocate, cannot be the person who's going to be Meilitz Yosher on this child. Cannot be Meilitz Yosher. Who is the one who could be Meilitz Yosher? Yitzchak Avinu has 2 children, Yaakov and Esau. Yaakov and Esau, the Gemara says, Esau was over 5 Averis on the day that Avram Avinu, his grandfather, was Nifter. Avodah Zarah, Gilar Raya, Shvichus Domi, Uzbal, Naira Marosa, the whole 9 yards. And Yitzchak leaves him at home. He waits till he's 40 years old. What does he do? Tzad Noshim Tachas Ba'aleim. He goes and he takes married women to be with him. All in Yitzchak's house. He brings them to Yitzchak's house when he's 40. He says, you know what? My father married Rivka when he was 40. I also get married. Arebi Shazun. He has Yichus. And he marries Bosnas and Machlas, the daughter of Ishmael. What do they do, Bosnas and Machlas? There were mekatres l'avodah zarah. They established in Yitzchak's house a little mizbeach, and every day there were mekatres l'avodah zarah. What happened with this mekatres? From this smoke, Yitzchak becomes blind for a period of 57 years. He never ever regained his eyesight. Just from this smoke of the avodah zarah. Yitzchak Avinu perpetuated and told the Kodesh Baruch Hu told Klal Yisrael, you don't throw a child out of the house. He could be smoking marijuana. He could be married to Mbosmas and Machalas. He could be married to Shiktzis. He could bring the Shiktzis home and make the father blind. So blind for 57 years. He cuddled him. He loved him. He took him in. So when Klal Yisrael messes up in the future, Yitzchak Avinu comes in and says, I will be the Sanegor. I'm going to be the advocate to come ahead and save No Imocho Kedusha Shmecho. The Wechatu, Palga Alayve, Palga Alecho, half on me, half on you. And if you're not masking, I'm going to take it all upon myself. This Yitzchak that was Moisa Nefesh by the Akedah to give his neshama, to show the Mesiras Nefesh, this Yitzchak continues his life. Yes, indeed, Yitzchak is Midas Adin. But he saw with his eyesight, a kind warf man nicht weg, they say in Yiddish. A child you don't expel out of the quarters of the house. A child is a child no matter what. Cuddle him, love him, take off your fur and cover him so he has the warmth. You never know that warmth will take you. It's possible there's hundreds and thousands of Talmidim that grew up in the school that would have never happened if not for the Chofetz Chaim, whose Yortzeitis today would cover those child who is rotten child, who smoked on Shabbos, who wasn't accepted to the Radin Yeshiva. Lo yarpecho v'lo yazveko. Lo yarpecho, the Chofetz Chaim was telling us, on September 13th, the Chofetz Chaim was telling us, Lo yarpecho v'lo yazveko, I'm always going to be with you. I'm always going to hold on to you. Don't worry about it. Al tiro ve'al techos. There is no reason for us to worry at all. Today's shir, as we say, and I would like to keep to the timetable, is in merit of a good friend, Chizkiyo Matisio Yered, who is very dear, very close to me, who has a emase gute neshama, besides being a brilliant scholar and a Talmid Chacham on his own, and a mevakesh emes. I'm always mekane him with a thirst of knowledge, sitting there with his cards and taking notes of every new chiddush to store it, to bring it into his neshama, with his feinkeit, with his gutzkeit, with his ehrlichkeit, with being so sincere and so serious about his life, giving to others, giving to his children, giving to his talmidim, and giving to us, his fellow friend. I want to say and end off with the Gemara in Maseches Brochas. The Gemara says Chizkiyo, which is the name added on to our friend Matisyo. Chizkiyo was not Oisek B'Piri V'Rivya. He did not want to have any children. Why? Because he saw Beruach HaKodesh, Chizkiyo HaMelech, the Havale Boned Le'Ma'aliyah, he saw that children, no good children, will come out of him. So he never got married. Never got married. Which is a question, because Chizkiyo, Melech Yisrael, was a gadol, and he knows if he has Ruach HaKodesh, Ruach HaKodesh tells him it's not going to help him. The child is going to happen by hook or by crook. It says the Gemara that Ishayo comes in to visit him during his sick. It says, Bayomi Mahem Cholo Chizkiyo, Chizkiyo became very ill. Vayova Elov Yeshayo ben Amoitz, Vayomer, Koyamar Hashem, Tzav lebeischo, ki meis atav leisichim. Tells him, says the Gemara, what is meis atav leitichye? Meis atav bo'ilam hazeh leitichye bo'ima abo. Omar lechizkiyo, my kulehai. Why are you cursing me out? Ishayo Hanovi, what did I do? Omar lemishum deleo sakta bepiri v'rivyu, you did not practice piri v'rivyu, you didn't have any children. Omar lechazoi b'ruach HaKodesh, denafkim in boned le'ma'aleh, I see the Ruach HaKodesh, I don't want to bring to the world children that are not good children. Umale Shayo tells him, "Behade kafshe derachmona lo malach." Man de mifkadet yiboylach lemevod. It's none of your business. If you have a tzivui, go ahead and have the non-good children. Omar Chizkiyahu tells him, give me your daughter. Maybe the schus of me is schus of her together. Mine and your schus will have banim aliyah. Omar Yeshayahu tells him, Nigzera alecha gezeira. Sorry, it's too late in the game. You messed it up. You're not getting there. Omar tells Chizkiyahu to Yeshayahu, Ben Amotz. When he didn't mention his first name, it's a kind of, the Goyen says, when he don't mention the first name, it's some kind of a strange wall between them. Kalei nevuasecho v'tzei. Klinchov. Don't want to hear anything from more. Out of here. Throw him out of the house. Kach mekublani mibeis avi abo. Afilu cherev chadam unachas al tzavor shel odom alim na'atzu min arachamim. David HaMelech saw the malach v'char bo yishlufa b'yodoi. And he davened, and the davening did help. And the davening miyad, says the Gemara, Vayosem Chizkiyahu panav elakir vayispalel el Hashem. He went to the kir, to the wall, and he was mispalel el Hashem. Says the Gemara, what does it mean vayispalel el akir? What does it mean he's davening to the wall? Says the Gemara, he took to kiros liboi. Omar Rab Shimon ben Lakish mikiros liboi, says Rashi b'chol livo. Shenema mea yochilo kiros libi. We're all isolated. We're all quarantined. At least the people there at Yisrael right now. Can't get out of the house. We are with the walls. But you could be mispalel alakir. You could go ahead, Chizkiyahu, and get weiter and weiter mikiros liboi. Indeed, this pure heart. There is hemokim to daven for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to get out of this quarantine. We have to take this lesson with us for Rosh Hashanah. You know what? Not everyone is perfect, but take him. Don't disconnect. Lo yarpako v'lo yazveko. Give him the mantle. Give him the coat. Klal Yisrael chotu. Let him smoke marijuana in the house and get blind. Daven. Daven to the walls. You don't need a big crowd. You don't need 500 people. Each person has his own wall. Daven. And Bli, HaKadosh Baruch Hu definitely would listen to our tefillah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu definitely would take v'yotzienu mitzah le'ervacho me'afela le'oiro mishibud le'geulo, and in Mirza Hashem Chizkiyahu, Matisyahu, Yered will be with us for many, many more years of Talmud Torah, of our Batzas Torah, of Nachas, from the children, from the grandchildren, Ad Bias Goyel Tzedek, Bimheira Beyomeinu, a good year, a happy good year for everyone.